Welcome to Wellness and Wonder. Today interviewing Lucian Tarnowski. Okay. Welcome back to Wellness and Wonder for another episode with the amazing Lucian. So I'm gonna make a little introduction before interviewing this amazing idol for me. So people would do anything in this world, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. So one does not become enlightened in this life by imagining figures of light and but by making the darkness conscious. So we never been so conscious about what must be changed to get better on track in this world and in our daily life. Enlightenment means that transformation is taking place. So within us, we must find a higher consciousness. Today with Lucian, we are going to go through this amazing topic of enlightenment to thrive for a better future, which is basically what we are going through now. We have to build our future. Like Lucian always says, this is the most important era. And why do we love this word enlightenment so much? Because enlightenment is ego's ultimate disappointment. Hello, Lucian. So welcome to Wellness and Wonder.
Thank you so much. So delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So delighted, me too. So I'm sure people know about you, but just we can make a little brief of your history, why you're here now in Ibiza, what happened in the past to become who you are.
Yeah, so my origin story, happy to share that. It's a great place to start. You just met my brother yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Especially for the first time. So, I mean, so much of what I do is like Steve Jobs says, the dots connect in the rearview mirror. And so much of my purpose in life came from my parents. It's probably a good place to start. My father was born in 1929 in pre-war Poland. So he kind of lived through the war, had a very tough experience of being put in prison, being on the run, that kind of thing. And then in Poland. And that really shaped him and ultimately then shaped my brother and my childhood. But basically, Dad ended up creating, was part of creating one of the world's largest communities around disability and leprosy in India. He started in the 60s with this kind of just unbelievable expedition he led, where he did 100,000 miles around the world in his wheelchair in the 60s.
Wow.
To assess the situation of handicapped people around the world, because he had got polio in the 50s whilst writing the first guidebook for Bali, interestingly. And it's like a really interesting origin story.
Yeah.
Anyway, fast forward, I was raised traveling a lot of the world and looking at being aware of communities as solutions to societal challenges. It was a real focus area of my father. And so, I got involved in that foundation very early. Sebastian and my brother, took over that foundation when I was 18 and got involved in youth leadership, education programs, vocational education programs.
Yes.
And that's where I got really interested in talent. One of the projects that we had done early on was create a school that focused on training blind girls IT skills.
Wow.
And English language.
Beautiful.
And, really like high impact transformation. And so I got very interested in this fact that, human capital, talent, is the world's most wasted resource. We think of wasting energy, water, food, etc., but we don't really acknowledge quite how much we waste our own, human potential in society.
We waste so much energy in our everyday life with bad thoughts, bad decisions, bad choices, just because sometimes we have to go deep into the darkness to feel emotions, while there are so many other ways, Lucian, to reach this depth without falling into this trap of basically being a victim of the society. So this amazing foundation, does it exist already?
Yeah. It's so that's called Take Heart. That was started by my father in 1964 and still operates.
Wow.
And you know that we have a kind of almost like parent foundation in India that we support, that was created by Baba Ante, who was the protege of Gandhi.
Wow.
And my father's adopted father, kind of my brother and my like adopted grandfather in a sense, who was a great, you know, role model and inspiration in our lives growing up. And you know, he was very famous in India. He won the Templeton Prize and the Gandhi Peace Prize and UN Peace Prize and like numerous very well celebrated. And you know, it was with that I began a really lifetime journey in and around like this notion of the return to community.
Yes.
How do we come back to communities? How do we empower communities? How do we financially empower communities? How do we focus on unleashing the collective potential of communities? And by that, I'm focusing on the human potential. How do we create these spaces where we can come into and be at our best? And the design of the community is all about collective thriving. You know, the unleashing the potential of each individual stakeholder member of that community coalition.
Yes.
And yeah, that's been the journey. It started in 12 years ago when I started my first company called Brave New Talent.
Yes.
And it was a very early on. It was like a social network enabling people to learn from each other and from organizations around future career decisions. And then it evolved into a whole community ecosystem where we'd work with companies to create a digital environment around the stakeholders that they're looking to engage.
Yeah.
And basically connect communities of purpose and enable them to share opportunities, share learning, be able to create strategies together. And it was that through that work of my former company that I got involved in designing so many, like, you know, I was involved in literally hundreds of multi-stakeholder communities. And I started getting really interested in what is this meta story of the role of communities in envisioning the future of the world. Because I saw like nation states, you know, is the way we operate most of our kind of global decision making, yet they're not really let's just say they're not succeeding. They're not delivering on the promise. You know, it's like you look at climate change and you look at nation states, and they're actually like incredibly badly designed institutions for how we can deal with the scale of the challenges that face us.
I believe it's because of the personal interests that these big platforms are not able to save the matter, because as soon as we have personal interests, we create this basically inequality. And my question regarding this community discussion we are having is, how can we combine different actions of people on the scale and on the speed that we need for a smooth transition and with a minimum disruption regarding this community building? Because everyone is different, Lucian, and everyone has different approaches. Someone is faster, someone is not. So how can we combine these actions with the minimum of disruption and with the transitional phase?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, there's so many ways of answering that question, because it's so you know, it's so, I would say, context specific depending on what the purpose of the community is. But from a kind of from a big picture lens perspective, I would say that, you know, the first thing is that I believe the future is something to be achieved, not predicted. And so if we can bring teams together and different stakeholders together to agree on some will call it a North Star, like that goal, that
vision, the vision, like you always say.
The vision, right?
Yeah.
Our thinking is, from that point, we can actually reverse engineer the strategies needed to get there. And so this is what we've developed with United Planet, as a kind of, think of it as a decentralized society of coalitions and communities that are envisioning the future solutions for society. And then the up game, which is the other aspect of United Planet, is a methodology for which to time travel into the future, into this immersive reality, where we tell the stories in the present tense of what worked, what delivered on this vision of the world in 2030. And then how do we, the next step is that once we've got those stories, how do we design financial incentives to do outcome-based financing to get us to those milestones? Yeah. So that's the big innovation, is that if we can empower communities to be able to clearly articulate their vision, and then from that vision, be able to design the milestones and the people, the talent that can be unleashed to get us to those milestones. Yes. Our thinking is that will be able to create an engine of transformation where we can rethink and reimagine every aspect of our society to be fit for purpose, fit for this planetary age, fit to be within, if you like, planetary boundaries, so that we're not creating an extractive system, but we're creating a regenerative system that doesn't harm future generations. It's so beautiful. In fact, I've noticed, because as you, I'm a big fan of communities, and I love to build a community around me, because for me, sharing the same purpose, achieving it together is so exciting, Lucian. And as soon as you also have this vision in mind, there are so many coincidences and synchronicities that at some point actually bring you to this point where you actually experience the miraculous. It's very beautiful. And I would say, what's for you the vision you have of so my question is, for people to be able to build a community, they have to get out of their comfort zone, because as soon as we are brave enough to build our own desires, we don't have to follow anyone else. And of course, it's a responsibility. So what would you say, what's the strength we can give to people that are suffering because are a slave of the system or a slave of their daily life, and they want to be part of a community, but they're scared of the instability of the beginning? So how can we be so brave to let go of the comfort zone to explore other dimensions with people we trust? Yeah, well, the most important currency of any community is trust. And that, if we backdrop that with what's going on in society, we're seeing a kind of wholesale breakdown in trust. Trust is at a lowest level that we've seen in a long time. People just aren't trusting their governments. They're not trusting corporations. They're not trusting politicians. They're not, we've got a real, you could say, war on trust there. So I think the key thing is finding like-minded networks that are envisioning the same change that you're envisioning. So a big part of this is what is your purpose and your unique set of competencies and skills and talents that you could contribute to a team of teams working to realize that change. And there's so many of these community initiatives that exist, impact networks, coalitions, alliances, and they're ready and ripe for reimagination. Yeah. And that's really the way we think about it. And connecting to something you just said earlier around this idea of manifesting your reality. What we're doing with the up game is essentially, it's like what we as individuals will often do with positive psychology, that our thoughts create our reality. Many people are aware of those things, and it's like The Secret, right? It's we want to, abundance mindset creates abundance. It's not in any way woo to say that. It's your thoughts really do shape your reality. Now, many individuals know that and are already practicing that in their own lives. But what we're not yet so good at doing is doing it as a collective. We're not creating groups together to go and say, this is the future that we wish to see, and this is how we're empowering this network to do this like creation process of those desirable futures. And so that's where, from a storytelling perspective, where I started to realize it's the story that communities tell about ourselves and the purpose with which we exist that will drive the particular outcomes and their ability to attract others, attract funding, attract the resources they need to realize those visions. And so how we can then enable that and enable an individual to find their role within a bigger community effort, because that's what it's going to take. We're coming from this like age of the lone wolf, where we've really celebrated individual achievement, individual success, like the kind of cult of the entrepreneur, almost like that we've seen in society, and it's kind of come at a cost in some sense. That there is, we've created this like competitive ecosystem, when what we need is a cooperative ecosystem, and we need to design the incentives to bring all of the stakeholders that can achieve the collective vision for the future of society, to make sure that they're incentivized and able to contribute in a way that doesn't duplicate, doesn't cancel out, doesn't create the wrong type of competition, but actually rewards cooperation at the ecosystem level, which I would say is exactly how nature does it. Nature creates these balanced ecosystems where if any one actor in an ecosystem creates a lack of balance, the whole ecosystem suffers. And we're seeing that with humanity at large, where we've become a bad actor in many ecosystems with which we live. And that's the whole question of how do we change that?
Yes, the collective is the answer, not more individualistic. I watched a talk you had a long time ago, and you told something very important to me, which is the educational problems we had from the past. So during the Industrial Revolution, they basically taught us that education means waking up same time every day, going to work. But then what's the collective in there? Like then we are following basically the same system as before, which is totally wrong. Now it's time to basically not feeling tied up to this system and think of the collective more than ever, because that's when we have truly this power, the big power to change things. Not anymore going to the office, doing what they tell us to do, for sure. And yes, Lucian, but so this is a moment of reborn. So we're understanding this transformation. We cannot transform sometimes if we don't die somehow. And I love to compare human beings as a seed. So as a seed, to achieve our greatest expression, we must also be completely undone. So the shell cracks and the inside come out and everything changes. But for some people, Lucian, they don't understand this growth, and they feel like they're completely distracted. So I would say this is a very important message for people that feel lost or completely confused. It's actually a moment of rebirth and not the opposite way. They are changing.
Totally. And I think the beautiful story that many people will share here is the story of metamorphosis, and the story of like the caterpillar to the butterfly. And the caterpillar has no idea that it's becoming a butterfly as it kind of goes through this process. The caterpillar thinks it's dying, and it's probably terrified as the imaginal cells like transform it. And so I think for a lot of people, change is scary. Yet the status quo, if we continue on the status quo, we are 100% going to destroy the planet. 100%. It's like, so without change, we're like, we're going to extinguish ourselves. There's no doubt we're on a pathway to that. So we actually have to have this. We have to transition, everything from like climate change, but it goes way beyond climate change. Like there's many different, many different transformations that are necessary for us to have a thriving civilization in harmony with all life. You know, we're a long way away from that. And so I think of this as, you know, you talked about the death and the rebirth, and it's actually something we've developed, we brought into the game, is we symbolize your the beginning of the game as the death of your present self. And we will go through a process where you will let go all of the things that you wish to let go of in the world, your limiting beliefs, your prior assumptions, your conditioning that might have conditioned you to a certain way of thinking, etc. And you'll consciously look to like leave those behind as you transition into the future, into the storytelling role. And then we go through, we introduce an oath. We call it the United Planet Oath, which goes like this. So we are a united planet. I am Gaian. On my honor, I commit to a thriving civilization in harmony with all life. And so very simple. Think of it almost like what doctors take with the Hippocratic Oath, saying do no harm. But this is to all citizens of Gaia, like we're all on this planet together. How can we commit to co-creating a thriving society? And so we'll start there, and then what we do is, as we go through the game experience, we'll lead up to like the full games will lead up when we complete with ether, and I can unpack that. We are developing this initiation that we call the twice born initiation. And it's an interesting concept where by the end of your time together in the future, you consciously choose to birth yourself, because like all of us, we're born, right? But we don't necessarily know if we consciously choose to birth ourselves or not. You know, we arrived here as infants, but now as adults, we can consciously birth our future self and say, who is it that I want to be? What do I want my role to be in this decade of transformation? And how can I spend some time thinking about what is my purpose? What is my deepest dharma in this world?
Yeah.
And how can I do that in a social setting where I can be seen and witnessed by others? And so the idea that we've been developing is that this is actually a kind of initiation in some sense, like you know, I'm not talking about a kind of a sort of a cult in some sense, but more a gamified practice, a gamified ritual, where we can witness each other's best self, and we can say, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to contribute. And our thinking is that would be something that we can experience throughout society, because we kind of lost initiations in a way, you know, in the traditional rites of passage that you may see that have been how humans made sense of their world for hundreds of thousands of years in this tribal setting. We've kind of we've lost a lot of those meaning-making ceremonies in society. So how can we rethink meaning-making around this planetary mission and around being a committed member of the team, of this transition team that's emerging, is a lot of what we're thinking about with the up game being like a cultural experimental layer for how do we galvanize communities to rise to their best.
Totally. I would say you are an enlightenment thinker, Lucian, because you are a liberal and you are basically toward humanists to support equality and human dignity. I really love it. And also regarding what you just said, let's remember, people, that success is not about an individual success. You will never be successful if you just work for yourself and if you just be by yourself. Success is when you are able to act upon the world and the community. That's when success is really happening. So people sometimes tell me, oh, Franci, what can I do to have success? Well, start acting upon the good of people around you instead of thinking of yourself, instead of thinking of making money maybe every day. There are so many other things to do apart making money. Money is sometimes is the last thing we need, because even though it's energy, I believe we can spread so much more energy that is not only money. So regarding equality and diversity, about the collective we are discussing together, Lucian, I believe one of the way to basically delete this concept of inequality, pushing instead the diversity, which is an amazing concept in my opinion, because the more different we are, the more interesting it is. So to go against the inequality, I would say we should increase activities that are very artistic, like you also said in many talks I listened to you. And so artistic activities help people to feel equal, because it's a moment of expression where we don't think much of the inequality because we are all together creating something in the same space. So maybe countries should increase these activities to express creativity for people in countries where there is a big sense of inequality, like we know where, I mean, South Africa, even England sometimes, in America. Do you think that that would be a right approach?
Yeah, so I think the country, obviously there's like enormous inequality around the world throughout society, and it's getting to a threshold where it's not sustainable. Whenever, if you look at history, whenever we've had this degree of inequality, it's always ended in war of some sense, war, revolutions, etc. And we're kind of like, if you plot this moment with what's called the Gini coefficient, the delta between the wealthy and the poor, if you plot this moment in history, we're kind of like overdue a revolution in some sense. So like we are, the reality, I believe, is that we're facing a wholesale systemic breakdown. We're facing like massive social unrest. We're facing like massive like resource scarcity issues, like whether it's going to be water wars, energy wars, food security, those kind of things. We're like actually way more unprepared than most realize. And I think we're also way closer to the house of cards that is quote unquote society and the kind of the markets, the economy. We're closer than most realized that house of cards actually being falling and creating like unimaginable way, like it's so, because you get into kind of complex theory, it's so unimaginable the ways it can, the knock-on effects. So for me, it's like when you realize like how unstable society is, it's like we need to be able to create resilient communities. We need to be able to create spaces for collective intelligence to be applied to reimagine the structures in our world that serve.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think nation states is the place to do it. I think nation states, countries, in that sense, are kind of problematic. I'm much more interested in how cities transform themselves, and how we can create a network of cities where cities can reimagine how to create a more of a just society, more like reduce inequalities, create more of a kind of thriving for all citizens within the city. And there's a lot of great innovations happening there with city mayors, with citizen democracy, citizen spending budgets, like that are happening. And that's where we're seeing, as we scale United Planet, being able to have this like local distribution strategy where we can partner, for example, with local organizations or local city mayors to re-envision solutions to social inequalities in a particular city. And the Upgame can be like a methodology to do that. So I think it's a
it's up to us, basically. It's up to us. Okay, sometimes it's missing guidance, but it's up to us to build this. We can if we want to. Yes, Lucian.
100%. And that's I think the biggest like social conditioning that I think is I and many others like to challenge is so many of us have been deeply conditioned to think the way the world is like unmovable, that they take for granted the fact that we have nation states, even though they're only, as a concept, the modern concept of nation states is like 200 years old. It's like most nations like have come out of the Second World War and those structures, and they might not be the most like the most effective way of designing a single planetary ecosystem. And so this is where we think like innovation needs to happen at the community level, at the coalition level, at the bioregion level, at the city level, so that we can create these like localized blueprints of like successful transformations, and then scale them around the world. Because if it works in one city, it's highly likely to work in many cities. And so that's some of the things we're thinking about, is like, how do we roll these like innovation games, these innovation transformation games? How can we roll that out at a city level around the world?
Absolutely. And there are so many communities actually that have are about to be built, and I'm so proud of these guys I've been interviewing last time, so young and so brave, so driven. It's incredible, Lucian. And sometimes they find the courage because they listen to people like you or to this kind of podcast. Sometimes to be guided, we don't necessarily need someone present all the time. We can just get inspired by other people, by what they're doing, and find the strength to just act on it. Yes. So, dear Lucian, I know now you're in Ibiza, you have this beautiful place where basically you invite people either to stay or they rent their place at yours. And your idea is to do these little experiments to understand the people's needs and to understand this innovative energy, how can be increased. So, what's your vision about this place where you are at?
Yeah, so we're in. I'll show you actually. I'll show you a little view out the window. We're in beautiful Ibiza here, which is like absolutely pregnant with the renaissance, I guess, with this regenerative renaissance.
Yeah.
And is attracting lots of people from all over the world come through here. And, many of us that live here are seeing this as a kind of a prototyping lab for future solutions. And so that's what we've been doing here, is we rented a bigger home than we needed. And my partner, Tatiana, who runs Leaders on Purpose, who would be a great person to interview as well.
Amazing.
We have just different friends, and we had over 100 friends from around the world come and stay with us. Yeah, and it's a bit of a hub, and it was built off something I was doing in San Francisco, where I took on this big space called Savannah House. It was
Savannah House. Amazing.
It was this cool story. It was the house that William Filmer, who built the Golden Gate Bridge, it was his home, and he conceived of the Golden Gate Bridge in that home. And with a bit more, even more historically relevant, it was built on top of the well of the Ohlone people, the indigenous people in the Bay Area. And so it was the oldest gathering place in the whole Bay Area. And we turned this space into what we called a prototype planetary embassy. And the notion was it was an experimental lab for kind of regenerative civics, essentially, for like, how do we bring the people, the communities, the solutionaries together? They're envisioning like non-incremental transformations that could put the world on the right track. How could we bring them together in a way where they'll meet others, they'll be able to seed radical hope? Because often when you're in the trenches of that, you feel very alone, and it's like, it's easy to get depressed by the state of the world. And it's so important for us to find our tribe and find community. And so we were doing that. And before COVID, we hosted over 100 gatherings for 3,000 people. We put a 70-person dining room table in there, had the most epic, like long dinners with 2 fireplaces. And it was absolutely amazing. I learned a lot there, and started developing like, what is this like physical infrastructure that you could liken to the places, like if you look at any moment of like a cultural explosion, like Paris in the 1920s, or where you had like all these great thinkers, Hemingway and Picasso and Steiner, and like they were hanging out together, or even like you quoted Jung at the beginning, where like the tea shops in Austria, where you had like Jung and Freud coming together and chatting, or even like Renaissance times, the courts, the Medicis, etc. How can we intentionally create these spaces that attract the thinkers and the builders and the creators and the artists that are already holding visions of a thriving future, to come together to realize those, to be able, or to support each other on that journey.
Yeah.
And this become really a team sport. And so we're seeing Ibiza as a kind of, part New World Fair, part New World fairy tale, like a new story, a new myth, a sort of new mythos of our shared future, and part like incubation lab for us to bring teams together to go through this process of envisioning. And our home is kind of a piece of that experimentation. We have friends come, and friends of friends come, and they'll often be doing specific projects, but to do it immersed in nature, surrounded by others that can be thought partners and that kind of thing, is just extremely useful. Not to mention the role of like the motivation that comes when you really feel part of a team of teams, a kind of transition team working on like really creating what I think of as the most exciting new innovation since the creation of the United States. From a kind of governance perspective, like we're quite literally saying like, how do we create structures that can be designed and rolled out at a planetary scale that aren't limited by traditional geographic borders. It's super interesting time for like new innovators in governance, new innovators in financing, new innovators in incentive design, community design, bringing together that like incredible, those incredible like thought leaders to be able to create something bigger together is very much part of the United Planet mission.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're gonna use this power for the good, as we just.
I mean, that's one of that United Planet oath is kind of that way. We think there's great responsibility that comes with the privilege, frankly, of stepping into the future and imagining the best possible possibilities. The best solutions, the best narratives that can address the systemic challenges of our time. There's great privilege in doing that. And the kind of the culture and the values that we look to develop within ecosystems we create is exactly around that. Like, how do we make sure the future is all of us or none of us? You know what I mean? It's inclusive to all of us, because many people are like, you're seeing this like issue across society, like us and them, that we're creating thriving for our community, but if you're not part of that, you're not included in that. And I think that's a very dangerous trend in the world, where the history has got, is full of like warning signs as to those trends. And you're seeing it so much in society right now. And so we think it's really important to have kind of like a meta modern approach where it's about creating an inclusive, a diverse, a thriving and abundant, a living within the boundaries of nature society, so that we can so we know what we're doing wrong. The question is like how we can turn that corner and deliver the solutions. And it's each one. Each kind of challenge is almost its own ecosystem. And so the way we've developed this with the Up Game is we've created 16 planetary leagues that go through seasons. It's almost like a team sport. And each league represents a kind of pillar of society, a pillar of the future. And so it goes through, it starts, for example, with food abundance, then goes to, I can go through the 16 really quickly because it will give you a flavor for what it's about. Food abundance, infrastructure transformation, regenerative cities, land stewardship, and that's the earth element. And we go to the air element, and it starts with health and well-being. Then it goes to thriving for all, planetary health, and then it finishes with unleashing potential. My favorite. It's all about talent, unleashing potential, and future education.
Talent is everything.
That's the air element, and then we go through to the fire element, and that is gender harmony. It is ubiquitous energy, wealthy commons, and circular economies. And then we go to the water element, which is community abundance, water security, ocean stewardship, and peace and justice.
So interesting.
And so we've got this kind of map of think of it like pillars of society. And for each one of those pillars, we will be launching this decentralized DAO, essentially, where teams and coalitions that are working towards those a thriving for all world, or a ubiquitous energy world, or a world of gender harmony, can be part of that league and can showcase the solutions that they believe are most likely to deliver on that goal. And then our thinking is, our big hypothesis is, if we can enable funders to do outcome-based financing of the milestones that take us towards that future, we can actually reverse engineer the futures we wish to see. And that our hypothesis here is that it's a lot cheaper or a lot more cost effective to finance the future from the future, i.e. start with the big scale transformation that we're looking to achieve, and then reverse engineer the steps to get us there, is a lot more effective with capital than if we try and do it incrementally from now.
Yes. And yesterday we were talking about you with your brother, and he told me this. Lucian always says, imagine you're already in the future and you look back, what would you change? What would you want? It's so true, because then you realize that what you actually build, your actions are making your own future. So it's about what you give, you receive. So if you think already of what you want to receive, then you know what to give. It's so beautiful.
Exactly. And it goes down to every individual. Every individual is then a piece of making that collective reality happen. And so then it's how can we design that? We're really at the beginning of this. I think I summarize with United Planet is kind of like a Shakespeare play. There's 3 acts. Act 1 is tell the story. Act 2 is experience the story. And Act 3 is then become the story. And so to break those down, number 1 is tell the story. Okay, how do we bring together the community leaders, the creators, the artists that have a clear vision for the future that's based on a possible reality, on the best possible, if we align the incentives and we align the transformations, how can we deliver on that? And we tell that story, and we tell it in a way that's high fidelity, we record video content, we can really immerse people into those visions. And then number 2, experience the story. As this develops, we're thinking the up game will become a whole digital twin of the planet in the multiverse, where you can step into your local community and you can meet other time travelers that also want to envision the future of your community, or the future of societal challenges, or using your community as a canvas to create solutions at the planetary scale. And you start to learn about those stories from others that have been through the game. It's kind of how we're thinking about it. And you can be part of, you can join these DAOs, these decentralized teams where you can find your role. And then Act 3 is how do we make the story the best possible story we can collectively articulate about our future? How can we actually design the financial incentives that allow us to fund the steps necessary to get there, i.e. become the story, become the transformation we wish to see? And that's why we're thinking this is like it's essentially like an ecosystem, a storytelling engine to become that which it's the story it's telling. But it's a huge audacious undertaking. And one that's going to require so many brilliant people to be part of. But it's a very exciting time to be kind of blueprinting these different pieces and these cultural layers and the structures for how do we really unleash coalitions and communities to be engines to realize the vision that they hold.
Absolutely, Lucian. Thank you so much for your amazing words. And I would say, let's remind, like you said, sharing our vision is so important. We cannot attract what we don't envision and what we don't share. So sharing is so important in today's world. People are so scared to share their intentions, to share their stories, because I don't know why. Well, this is a big mistake. I've been noticing it because I'm doing these sessions at home with amazing people, and we all share stories. Not everyone wants to share because they are scared, they have fears. And we shouldn't have fears because we are all in the same world. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like, it's who is it that said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Absolutely.
It's like I think if there's one thing I've seen from a position I feel really privileged to hold, where I've probably listened to more visions of the future than than most. Obviously investors are listening to visions of the future, etc. But across the board, it's been very broad. The different teams is that radical hope is something that we can really have around the future. Like obviously the story we're being told in the mainstream media, etc., is that we're in a crisis, and absolutely we are. But the number of solutions that exist that I've seen are just like game changing. They are there. And so I think being part of a movement of movements in some sense that's about seeding more radical hope, because people are really disenfranchised by the future. People are really like fearful of the future. And this is where this trust issue that we raise, this war on trust, comes in. Right now, the Edelman, I often quote this because it's the Edelman Trust Barometer, says that 4 out of 5 people in society believe the current system is broken, that it's not working effectively. It's leaving people, obviously it's like creating great inequality. It's almost by design.
Yeah.
What is even scarier than that stat is 2 out of 3 people in the world believe that the future is going to be even worse than the present. And this is like a major thing to focus on, and it is that we talked about manifestation in the collective. Yeah. And if we collectively tell ourselves a dystopian story, a kind of black mirror story of the future, that's going to be, and that's what we believe is going to happen, in that we believe like that, we're going to have more and more like inequality, power, but like power structure, struggles, etc. It's like that we're feeding that narrative. And so I believe it's never been so important to feed the narrative of possibility and transformation. Yeah. It's really what the United Planet ecosystem is all around. It's like, how can we find those storytellers and the creators to be able to seed collective radical hope? Essentially, like, I love this notion of a rapture ideology for the 100%. And to break that down, it's like this feeling of like collective power that comes, and like that we're unstoppable, that can come when your like football team wins, or your that feeling of oneness that you have in sports. Like, how can we create that feeling around the future of society? Yeah. And that's what we're looking at, and asking what are the traditions, what are the rituals, what are the practices that support the enablement of collective intelligence and collective impact.
So totally.
And getting it.
Yes, Lucian. And I love being in a community that you trust, where you also feel trusted. You become so powerful, because at the end we are so powerful. People don't understand really our inner powers. They're incredible. And if we are trusted, we recognize our inner power, so we're able to build. So being able to be part of this community is essential in today's world to feel empowered. So important, Lucian. I would say, I love to say that in my opinion, life is like a game of chess. And to win, we have to make a move. Knowing which move to make comes from an insight. And we get knowledge by learning the lessons that are accelerated on the way. So it's about, like you say, learning, knowledge, sharing wisdom, achieving it together, feeling empowered. There is nothing better than this life. It's the best.
100% agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, Luciano, what would you say, the last message, because we've been talking for already for a long time, and I would love to say the last message regarding this threatening future, regarding this new era coming, because now is the time to transform and change what has to be changed, because our changes are going to stay long term now, and it won't be possible to change them anymore. It is the time to act. What would you say?
I would say that we are at one of the most exciting times ever to be alive. Number one, in that we have now the tools, we have the infrastructure, and we have the will to transform every aspect of our society. And it's an open invitation. You know, it's like if you feel you want to be part of that transition team, you know, there's so many ways that you can that you can design your life to be part of those transformations, rather than necessarily like thinking of, you know, how can I just focus on like living a good life within your financial perspective. And so I would say, you know, being part of this solution team of like, and seeding radical hope and working in community is like it gives so much joy, and I'm just encouraging for all of us to step more into that.
Yeah, so true. Instead of creating problems like we always do, we should find solutions. We're so good at creating problems as human beings, and we should add our own pieces consciously so that we eternally stay. If we act consciously in love, at work, the piece we add to what we are adding is going to stay. It's incredible.
Exactly.
See.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucian, for this amazing talk. I can't wait to interview you again.
Yeah, we're absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And, you know, check out unitedplan.et, just United Planet, and up.game. As we emerge, we're very much in the kitchen cooking it up, but it's an exciting time. So.
Yes. Can we repeat again what we have to check so people can...
Yeah, it's United Planet, which is www.unitedplan.et.
Yeah,
is the domain. And then the up game, where we're going to be doing more as we actually develop the actual game infrastructure, is just up.game, www.up.game.
We're going to check it out. No, can't wait. Right. Lucian, amazing. Well, let's say bye to our listeners.
Thank you.
To see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.